Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
And I am Scott War. Today's episode, we're going to talk about I'm going to start that over. And I'm Scott War. And today we're going to talk about adaptation and diversity in training. We're joined by the ever adventurous Emma Cook-Clarke and Adam Campbell, who joined us about a few weeks ago, and we talked about balance in our training. And now we're going to talk about this adaptability and diversity in training. Gives us kind of a perspective, a different perspective on how we go and do our training. Both Adam and Emma, they excel in all sorts of outdoor sports. In fact, we were just talking to Emma. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can see in the background she has some different kind of oars that your boyfriend's father made. Is that right?
Uncle.
Anyway,
Yeah.
So she's all over the map as far as outdoor activities. Adam has a lot of achievements under his belt. If you don't know who Adam Campbell is, he has been a member of the Canadian, get this, Don, Adam's been a member of the Canadian duathlon, triathlon, mountain running, ultra running, sky running, and ski mountaineering national teams. I don't know how many patches do you have on your jacket for all those teams, Adam?
Well, it's an extra large jacket to make space for all those, Scott. That's a lot of decal.
No, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I mean, my background really did come from triathlon. And that's sort of where I learned the craft of training and being a professional athlete. And, instantly as a triathlete, you're doing multi-sports. And I've always just been drawn to doing a lot of sports. My whole childhood was that way. And that's how I just enjoy moving and moving in different ways and learning how to use your body. And I think just, variety is the spice of life, and it keeps things interesting. And there is a lot of crossover. And I think it's cool to learn new skills. So I'm trying to apply that.
With that background, it absolutely, qualifies you for this discussion, diversity and adaptation, because you're doing different things. What do you think, and this is going to go to you too, Emma, what do you think you brought over from being a triathlete into your other sports? If that was go ahead.
Let's hold that for a minute. Let me finish the introduction, because we didn't introduce Emma yet. And I had another thing for Adam, and then we'll get it. I'll have you ask that question. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We get all this on YouTube, I hope.
Yeah.
All of this. Good.
Of course. We don't edit YouTube.
Good.
Hey, Adam, one of the other things that I did a little bit of research on, and I didn't know this, and I still don't know the full story, but you're a 3-time Guinness World Record holder. What records do you hold?
Running the fastest marathon in a business suit. So I ran 2:35 at the Victoria Marathon in Victoria, British Columbia. And then most people tethered together running a marathon. I think there was like 125 of us at the Calgary Marathon. And Then I was part of a 24-hour treadmill relay. So farthest distance run in 24 hours in a treadmill, and a team of, I think there was 6 of us. Yeah, 6 of us.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And joining us also with Adam is Emma Cook-Clarke. She was a competitive soccer and rugby player prior to college, and then migrated to running and competing for the University of Calgary in cross country and track and field. After she earned her degree in environmental science, she combined her passion for running with her love of the alpine, exploring the world of ski mountaineering and competing in mountain trail races. And after that intro, you've obviously found out that these athletes have a diverse background in outdoor activities, and that's what we want to talk about today.
Scott, I had a question, but after I heard that intro, I have a different question. Adam, tell me about 125 people, plus or minus, that are tied together for a marathon. Now, I've run marathons, and sometimes you have a great day. Sometimes you have a not so great day. It really depends on the environment and maybe what you ate the night before, how much training you've done. What did you do with one of those 125 that may have not been having a great day? Did you drag them along? Did you cut them free? Did you start off with 200 and ended up with 25? There's some details I need to learn.
Yeah, well, I mean, no person left behind, so you just drag them. That's right. No,
Nice.
if you can't keep up, you get pushed. No, I mean that's the beauty of these challenges is it adds the complexity of like human dynamics and different skill levels and different motivation. And we were all out there. Nobody had done this before as well. So speaking of
Yeah.
adaptability,
Yeah.
I've never run tied for somebody else, and certainly not for whatever 4.5 or 5 hours, however long it took. And I didn't know most of the people that I was tied to either. So there's also a pretty strong get to know you component to it, which is interesting. And that's part of the adaptability component is doing some things that are just, I don't know, out of your comfort zone and, kind of quirky and fun. And there's lots of different ways you can approach running. And that's one way of kind of keeping it fun. I also ran cross country in college, and even though it's an individual event, you're still part of a team when you're doing that. And I found that was, you push yourself in a different way in those events than you do when you're just solely racing for yourself as well. So I think that's a super interesting aspect to it.
Scott, before your question, I finished painting this picture. Do you have a rope around your waist, or did you just have a bungee cord that you connected? How did you tie yourself together?
Yeah, so we had bungees. It was bungees because there had to be some give in the system. So we used like medical bungees between people, and then it was tied around. I'm trying to remember exactly what the system was, but it also had to be able to move around the waist thing. So I don't remember what we had around our waist, but the tether had to move around the waist as well. I mean, when somebody had to go to the bathroom, that was the harder part.
Yeah.
I hope Lazarus Lake doesn't listen to this episode, because I sense he could come up with some crazy ultra marathon idea that has something to do with a bunch of people tethered together with bungee cords.
Yeah, I'll reserve judgment on where his mind might go, because I don't think I'm nearly crazy enough. So,
Emma, were you on that run? Did you join that run with Adam and the 124 others?
No, I
Okay.
was not one of those lucky people.
Emma, I wanted
a big test in patience.
Emma, I wanted to ask you. You started out doing some very different sports in high school, rugby, and what was the other one that I said? I can't remember what I said.
Soccer mostly.
Soccer, yeah. Why?
Mhm.
Why did you transition from those sports to running?
Great question. I think I finally realized that those sports have a lot of running in them, and that was one of my favorite parts, and that at practices or games, I just wanted to keep going. And the punishing laps or suicide runs we'd have to run weren't that punishing for me. I actually kind of enjoyed them. So I finally thought, okay, maybe I'll try and give this a go. And I actually was really fortunate to be accepted on to a youth expedition through the organization Impossible to Possible. So when I was 18, I went to India and I ran about a marathon a day for 7 days in the Thar Desert of Rajasthan. And I did this with 3 other youth ambassadors. So it's not too far unlike Adam's experience being tethered to 100 plus other people. We were together in this mission in the Thar Desert to run a large distance each day. And what was really cool about this is all of us came from very different backgrounds. There's a football player, a cheerleader, somebody with a run background, and then myself. And we were all different ages, but under 25. And I was kind of nervous going into this because I hadn't run those distances, and I definitely hadn't run those distances back to back, let alone in the middle of a desert in a foreign country. So me as an 18-year-old to go and do this successfully and learn a lot about my body and how teams work was really transformative. And I think it just was this very interesting lesson of you don't have to be fully prepared for one specific thing. What we've done throughout our lives actually does a lot, and that transfers over to help prep us for whatever it is that we're keen to do. And it's amazing what you can accomplish.
Emma, let's take a small diversion, if you don't mind. You mentioned this organization called Impossible to Possible. We know that you work for them now. We did a podcast called, how many years ago, Don? 10 years ago, maybe, with Ray Zahab, who started the organization. Tell us a little bit about that organization and what its purpose is.
Totally. So I don't actually work for them. I'd love to, but we all got emails affiliated with that organization when we did the expedition, and then
Oh,
yeah, able to stay part of it to some extent. But I'd love to get back and be more involved with them. But yeah, essentially the organization aims to educate, inspire, and empower people around the world. So in the expedition I went on, we had a theme, which was World Health. So we did a lot of research leading in, and then on the journey we had both teachers as well as doctors and other health professionals with us. And they created a curriculum so that while we were running, students from all over the world were following along, as well as following this curriculum that went over all sorts of topics surrounding world health. And we were able to go into different schools and health facilities over there and see how things were done, and just kind of create some dialogue, I guess, around that topic while doing something that was very physically challenging, which with that we hope to empower ourselves and inspire others to do the same for themselves.
what a crazy great mission that he created to take youth that may not have the belief in themselves to do hard things and show them that it's possible. I just love that organization. Don, we need to get Ray back on and talk to him about his organization and what it's accomplished over the years.
Well, we should do that, and we'll consider this an application. Maybe you will be working there, and Ray will listen to this, and that'll be your way in, and that sounds good. I want to go back to that running as a group again because I'm fascinated by it. I think
Don has a bunch of bungee cords in his garage that he's trying to find a use for.
I think if I was in the middle of that bungee group, that I would be stronger for it. I would have a different mindset. Instead of like feeling, oh, I'm getting fatigued. I think my legs are heavy. Is this a cramp coming on? Is my stomach going? Whatever excuse I could dream up, I would be part of that unit and that team. And I would just be focused on finished like never before, because I wouldn't want to let the whole group down. Did you have any feeling of that? Or maybe you were out in front. Maybe you were pulling the group. So you had that sense that I'm the leader. So that's my last question. But he may not even have an answer, but it makes me think. What would Adam say about that?
I don't actually remember where in the pack I was. I don't think I was in the middle because I'd probably be a little claustrophobic, to be honest. And I can be a little bit introverted, and I might find that to be a little overwhelming.
So it wasn't necessarily a line. You guys could have just taken 20 yards and went abreast.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't in a straight line. It was several people wide and several people long, more like a legion or a battalion of some sort, for sure. But no, I don't remember where I was exactly, but I do think that there is a different energy that comes with moving in a group, and I think there's a lot of like sociological research and history that just shows that humans like to move en masse. I mean, that's why people sign up for races as well. That's why people go to raves and dance parties and go to church and go to gatherings. There is something about just moving with other people that I think is a very core part of us as humans. And there's a really strong bonding element that comes with that. And so I do think that there is probably, I'm not going to say like, religious experience in any way, but it was, we were also raising money for a charity for mitochondrial disease research. So that also gives you another element of doing these things for something bigger than yourself, which I also think is really important.
It makes me remember that book that we read and did a podcast episode on, Don, by Sebastian Junger, the book that he wrote on tribes.
Yeah, the tribe. Very good.
Yeah. So let's get to the topic at hand. Get off the bungee.
What is the topic, Scott? Do you even know the topic?
I do.
Okay.
A lot of us are really busy with all the different things. We talked about that on our previous episode with you guys, that we all have these different responsibilities in our lives. And when we start doing running, especially long distance running, it seems like our training plans, whether we devise them on our own, whether we look them up on the internet, or whether we have a coach, entail a lot of running. And so it almost, you're either you're living your life or you're running. And I want to get to the fact that of this podcast episode title, that we need to maybe diversify or change up and have a variety of different trainings that will make us healthier and better runners. What do you think, Emma, on that? Do you right now? You just came off, or you in 2 weeks you have a big race, right? Your first big race of the year. Tell us a little bit about that, and how are you preparing for it? Are you just running, or are you doing a variety of different activities?
Oh, well, I started by racing in ski mountaineering this winter. So that was my way of preparing and changing things up. So I did a lot of skiing in the winter, a bit of running, and then regular strength training combined with some ice climbing, some gym climbing, some stationary biking, all that. And then now that the trails are starting to dry up a little bit more, I'm doing more mountain running, but I'm definitely not feeling fully ready, which makes sense. It's a long running season, so I can't expect to be feeling as fit as ever at this early in the season. But I'm able to rely on fitness throughout the rest of the year and years prior to help get me through it and hopefully stay durable enough throughout the race that I don't get injured. And then the fitness just keeps building as the season progresses.
So if we didn't mention, both Emma and Adam are from Canada, and it sounds like, Emma, that your variety of training is almost climate imposed on you. You can't get out to the mountains and do a whole lot of mountain running, trail running in the mountains, because there's snow all over. And so you're kind of forced to do other types of activities like the ski mountaineering. Do you think that there's a benefit from doing that versus somebody that lived in a warmer, climate that doesn't have 4 seasons?
Yes and no. For me, there's benefit because I really enjoy those other activities and I'm able to have access to them. I'm able to get the required training and safety courses and equipment to do them, but not everybody either has access or has desire. I have plenty of friends who live here who don't like skiing and they don't like winter, but they still live here. And so they go running in the dark, in the snow, year round. So for me, for sure, it's an advantage that I live somewhere with 4 seasons. It keeps everything exciting. By the time it's ski season, I'm really excited and ready for that. And then by the time it's running season, I'm ready for that too. So the seasons definitely like naturally add some periodization within the year. I have found though that I can get carried away because of that. And I have had injuries in the past that I think come from staying fit throughout the year through these other activities, jumping into running, which is higher impact and more repetitive than most. And like muscularly, cardiovascularly, all that, I can handle it. But other parts of the body are like, no, this is a bit too harsh of an activity. But again, I'm so excited, I'm eager, and I'm ready to get back into it that it can be hard to hold back. So there's pros and cons for sure, but overall for me, it's definitely a pro to do all sorts of different activities. And then at certain times of the year, I'll hone in on one.
When it comes to
That's
trail, oh, go ahead, Adam.
so I can sort of elaborate a little bit on what Emma's saying. There's something that we used to see quite a lot in triathlon, and you see a little bit as well in trail running. But in triathlon, when you'd have people who grew up swimming, like really, really good swimmers, they'd come into triathlon with these massive aerobic engines because swimmers can handle a lot of volume, and they start training at quite a young age. But they've got these massive aerobic engines, but they don't necessarily have the tendons and ligaments developed for running. And so, and they would also swimmers naturally do a lot of interval training. It's just the nature of the way that swimming is. And so they would come into running and they could go like quite hard, quite fast, but they didn't necessarily have the resilience to be able to handle it. They didn't have like the bone density because you lose a lot of bone density when you're swimming a lot as well. So they would be quite like they'd often get like stress fractures and in their shins and things, just because they didn't have the body to be able to handle it. And same with a lot of Nordic skiers, as they're transitioning out of Nordic skiing back into trail running, they come in with these massive aerobic engines, but it's basically the engine is too big for the body. It'd be the best way of describing it. And so they can kind of blow out. So it's, as Emma's kind of correctly indicating, those transition periods can be kind of tricky. So you have to maintain a little bit of the aerobic volume in non-impact ways while you're slowly increasing your run load. So you have to like take your overall stress into account. So your run volume may be small initially, but your overall training volume could still be whatever, like 12 to 20 hours, or plus, depending on how much time you have to train. And you need to progressively add volume, your run volume in the season, and not just start banging out this 120-mile weeks right away, as some elites do. So that's sort of like a word of caution to anybody who's doing that. But the other thing with the adaptability, I also think it really depends a lot on the style of racing you like doing. Like Emma and I both like doing mountain races, and mountain terrain naturally varies a lot. There's a lot of adaptability. Like, we spend a lot of our mountain races hiking, like you're hiking uphill essentially and then running downhill. You're having to be quite athletic, quite coordinated. Your stride will vary a lot. It'll be really long going downhill or on flats. You have to get a lot of turnover, and then you have to quickly transition to power hiking or being able to, it's more like plyometrics running uphill. So you need to have a much bigger, like movement vocabulary basically to be able to adapt to the terrain. And so you need to put your body through lots of different movement to be able to handle the rigors of it, of a race, where if you're a 100-meter sprinter, it's a very controlled environment. You kind of know exactly what you need to do to be able to power in that linear line. So you probably need to spend more time really honing in that specific discipline, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's a great point that trail running, just by definition, has a lot of diversity and a lot of adaptation, depending on whether you're climbing or descending or whatever you're doing. Much different than a road runner that might be just the next step is forward and hits the same exact spot on the shoe. You look at our shoes, we end up striking everywhere on that shoe. We don't wear out just one spot. Those shoes are busy out there as we're selecting steps and length of stride and what we're doing. So I think trail running, just by definition, fits this conversation very well.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's a much bigger strength component as well to trail running. And when you get into ultras and, start throwing, like running vests on, all of a sudden you're adding 1, 2, up to 5, 10 pounds, depending on how long your day is. And that's like and hiking uphill, like that's essentially a strength workout. So there's a huge aerobic component, but you also just need to be strong. And then you add that weight to running downhill. Once again, this is like a massive extra amount of impact going through the body. So you need to be able to strong enough to be able to handle that.
You brought up that people with swim background come into the sport with a huge aerobic motor, and they can get out there and start using it. Starts me thinking about maybe an economy car, a small Nissan, all of a sudden with a dragster motor in it. You're going to twist up some parts on that thing. And the same thing happens when you're out there running with this huge aerobic engine inside of you, but the frame isn't ready for it, because it takes time for bone density, for ligaments to thicken and strengthen, and the cartilaginous, the meniscus that between the femur and the tibia, that needs to strengthen as well. And if you don't adapt in time, you're going to end up with a cumulative stress injury. That's why it's so important to mix some of these aerobic activities with cycling or swimming. I remember when I was putting a lot of miles in, I had to go to swim and bike just out of necessity. I couldn't keep pounding. I knew I had time. I knew I needed the work, but my frame couldn't take it. I was younger into it and really benefited from some of those things that triathletes did. I didn't wear their gear, but I did go out there and do it.
Yeah.
You didn't have any spandex, Freeman?
I had respectful spandex, but it wasn't colorful with things like that.
I mean, when I started racing triathlon, we were still racing in budgie smugglers, so that's all you need to know about when I started the sport. So.
Wait! I just learned a new term. What did you call it?
A budgie smuggler.
Budgie
It's a-
smuggler.
Yeah, it's a
Hey
Speedo.
Ryan, can you Google that for us and give us a definition here? in a
Not
minute?
with my login.
I don't know what I.
Yeah, don't share
Maybe
your
you have-
photos.
Yeah, no photos. No.
Hey,
No.
Emma, I want to talk about the diversity again, bringing back these beautiful oars that you have on the wall back there. What about upper body strength? A lot of the training that we've talked about so far has been very lower body oriented, except for swimming. And there's a lot of upper body in swimming, of course. Do you do any variety of upper body besides strength training? Any other kind of activities? And why?
Yeah, well, the paddles behind are indication that I do like canoeing mostly, and some whitewater kayaking as well. So that's upper body. That's something that I've done since I was a kid, and find a really special relationship with water. So I'm always eager to jump in that if there's an opportunity. As far as other upper body activities, I really love to climb, both in the winter and summer on ice and rock. I live in a great spot in Canmore, Alberta that has a lot of options for that. And then that transfers really nicely into the running space, especially when it's more that alpine style running, or even in some of these races where there's a scrambling element. Having not just the strength, but the physical literacy as well, to be able to safely maneuver and navigate through different types of terrain is not only fun, but you can, if you have that skill, you can hopefully get through something in a safer way. So yeah, climbing and paddling, I'd say, are my main things for our upper body as far as activities go. And then just different strength stuff that adds up. I mean, even a lot of the exercises I do for my lower body, you have to still hold the weight with your upper body. You know, you're doing a deadlift. Well, you can't just only use your legs, or you're holding dumbbells in your hands, whatever. You get lots of training in that way. I also have some pull-up bars in my house that I'll just walk by and do a quick 5 or 10 if I need an energy boost. Yeah, so I think those are the main things as far as upper body strength. Again, it comes down to what I'm excited about, and a lot of these activities just naturally incorporate more of full body. Even purely running uphill, I'll often use poles, which uses the upper body a lot, and then ski mountaineering in the winter is actually quite a lot of emphasis on poles. And you're wearing a heavier backpack then, and you're a bit like hunched over, so you get a ton of core, back, and arm exercise as you go, which then helps as the running transition happens.
Yeah, I've got a question
Emma's
that,
also a
that both
firefighter,
of you.
so she'll.
Oh. Oh,
Yeah,
no,
Emma's
that's a
can you hear
cross
me?
train.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Emma's a firefighter, so there's obviously some cross training and strength component involved in lifting, large people out of buildings when it's burning. So yeah,
Right.
So now this question's for both of you, and it's really focusing on fueling and recovery. So when we think in the context, most of us have a pretty good sense of what it takes to recover from a short run or a long run, or some with speed or hill repeat. So we kind of have some experience with that and how we fuel for it. But can you talk about your experience of transitioning to a different sport? Do some of the same rules apply? How do they translate? More fuel for one, less fuel, less recovery? Can you talk about that?
I definitely find that you eat differently in the winter than you do in the summer. You obviously, especially when we're out ski mountaineering or ice climbing, foods that, you have to be careful, things might freeze. Like when you're out running in the summer, you can have water balls on the front of your pack quite easily. But when it starts to, if you're out skiing, when it's, I don't speak Fahrenheit, but say like 5 or 10 degrees Fahrenheit, it's quite cold out, your bottles will freeze. So you need to be careful with that kind of like energy management. Same with, like your bars might become solid. You might break a tooth. So maybe you're eating a little bit more. but you're also having to work hard to stay warm as well. So you do need to really be careful with like what your caloric intake is through those. I do find ski touring to be especially tricky because you often ski touring, you're out for 4 to 6 hours. And I realized by the end of the day, I may have only had about, half a liter of water. And so you're constantly dehydrated by the end of the day, because even though you may not feel like you're sweating to the same degree, you are perspiring the entire time. So you need to be quite conscious about refueling and rehydrating at the end of those long days of ski touring. You can eat a lot more on a bike, for instance. So biking is a really good opportunity to teach your body how to absorb calories, which then translates over to running. We're seeing a lot bigger emphasis on ingesting carbohydrates. And the best way of doing that is to actually train your gut. So going out on the bike and doing these lower impact activities and trying to increase your caloric intake, or specifically your carbohydrate intake, can translate over to running as well.
I think we can lose a lot of fluid exhaling in the cold out there. I've gone on cold runs and not felt like I need to drink much. If it was a hot day, I'd make sure I had 2 bottles, but on a cold day, I think, you know what, I'm not sweating much. I don't need much, but you can still get yourself in trouble because I think you're exhaling and losing a lot of fluid that way. I'm not sure, but I think, and we've been wrong before, Scott, on this podcast. So I'm not sure. Maybe somebody can straighten me out on that.
That seems accurate. I always still try and drink when it's cold out.
I've got Emma on my side, so I'm feeling pretty confident right now.
Great, perfect.
One of the things that I'm learning already from you two is the adaptability and the diversity of the training methods is not just for the physical, meaning the act of running, and not just for the aerobic capacity, but it's also to help with how to hydrate or how to train your gut. It's probably easier to train your gut on a bike than it is running, going up and down, up and down, up and down, and getting that jostling in your gut going. So I think that there's a lot of different. I think Don mentioned, as we were talking before we hit record, about the adaptability of the different muscles and tendons and soft tissue. So I think that that's one of the benefits of using a variety of different training techniques or different activities, is not just for one certain aspect of being athletic. It's for a broad variety of athletic physical attributes.
No, I think there's something to be learned from like anytime you go outside and move your body. I think one of the other areas with adding in some of these lower impact activities, one, I think you can handle more overall aerobic volume, so for like mitochondrial development and things, but then it also helps with recovery. Doing an hour run, is still somewhat hard on the body, or you can sit on your bike for 2 hours, get an extra hour of aerobic development, and not have the same kind of damage that happens. And you can also work different muscles. So you can work your posterior chain, which really helps climbing, for instance. A lot of cyclists and cross-country skiers have some of the fastest times on like hill climbs, running uphill. I think in one of the last films that Adam Peterman just put out, he was talking about a local hill climb in Missoula, and it's a cyclist who has the fastest time on this 30-minute climb, not a runner. I find that stuff to be really interesting.
And I think that if you're doing a lot of running and you're managing your body, you're listening to what's starting to ache a little bit or complain a little bit, or get a little swollen for the next day, that's the perfect time then to explore into these alternatives to keep your aerobic machine moving, to keep developing, to keep your cardiovascular moving without getting injured. So you show up with the bib on race day and you're in tip-top cardiovascular shape and you're not nursing an injury. That's a real key of showing up ready and not thinking, I hope halfway through this thing that my calf doesn't or my Achilles doesn't give in, because you don't want that. So that's a great thing about cross-training, managing your effort.
Yeah, I mean, one other thing, like swimming, for instance, like if you're in water, swimming is like a giant compression unit. So if you're trying to, after a long run, getting in some water, you're essentially, just the pressure of the water against your muscles does have like a big compression effect. So you can actually like help flush some of the, some whatever the gunk in your body. I'm not a exercise scientist, but yeah, that's why if you have a sprained ankle, get in the water. It's good for you. So
I'll just add a caveat there is that sometimes if we do have these little niggles or not, but we're putting our body through a lot, there is the possibility of then overtraining through the cross training because it changes things up. It uses different muscles, different groups. You're like, oh, I feel great still. But if you do have an injury, sometimes it's better to like dial everything back a little bit so that you can actually give your body the time it needs to recover is what I think. And an extra rest day every now and then will probably help you more than, oh no, I have to get this training in. So having some flexibility there, I think goes a long way. Yeah, that can be hard mentally, but it's important.
Yeah, Emma, you mentioned earlier some of the pre-spring workouts that you've been doing leading up to this first race that's coming up in, is it 2 weeks? I think I saw a tweet or a Instagram post where you said your first major race is here in 2 weeks. Tell us about how you not just in the winter spring train with different types of sports, but from now on, from now until the end of the summer, what kind of variety do you put into your training for your races?
Lots. I mean, running on its own has variety. And if I run along flat river trails, that'll be faster, probably like quicker turnover, bigger strides. If I decide to go up a mountain that's steep, I'll mostly be hiking. If it's really technical, I'll be going even slower. So that really changes in terms of what sort of training effect it has. I'll do a lot of riding as well. So mountain biking, or gravel road biking, or even pavement. So just kind of depending on weather and conditions. There's a few roads that they close to traffic through part of the summer, which is really lovely. Because then it's just you and some smooth pavement. So I'll do that. Sometimes I'll go on the Stairmaster or even the elliptical machine. I find is a good full body way to get some exertion in. And then some climbing as usually that's a bit of a rest day, unless there's an approach to the climb. So then you're having a bit of a heavier bag and you're hiking for a couple hours. So that all is ways that I like to add variety into training, which is just fun for me. It makes it all really enjoyable because you're always changing it up.
So Emma, you're going out there to these races expecting to, if not win, to podium. You're an elite athlete, an elite runner. Does the pressure of having 120-mile week put pressure on you to not do some of the variety that, oh, the other people I'm competing against are doing, 100+ mile weeks, and I'm doing a 60-mile week, but I'm also doing these other activities? Does that put any pressure on you?
I think it used to put more pressure on me. I think now I have gained more experience and had some results that back up my experience that maybe that's not best for me. I have never had anything close to a 60-mile week, not while running at least, other than that expedition that I was talking about where I ran every day for 7 days. But no, for me, less volume of running is much better. That allows me to just stay more energized, less injured, that sort of thing. So of course, part of me wonders, oh, but what if I was able to do the training that all these other people are doing and finding success? But I've come to grow more confidence in the fact that it's okay to have a different plan, and we can end up at the same place through a very different path. So that's something that I'm really glad that I've come around to accept, I think, is that I don't need to be so in doubt of my plan, because for me, I know that it works.
I want to pose the same question to you, Adam. Back in, not too long ago, you were competing for the podium. Did you have any pressure to put in these high mileage weeks running?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting further and further in the past, but yeah. Yeah, no, so actually it's an interesting question, but I think one area that I think a lot of trail runners fall into the trap of is actually looking at weekly mileage. Whereas if you look at the way cross-country skiers view it, cyclists view it, it's actually hours of training is a much better metric to look at. So like cross-country skiers, like an elite level cross-country skier will train 900 to 1,100 hours a year. That's a lot. That's quite a lot of training. That's like more or less 20 hours a week of training throughout a year. Because the distances can vary so much. Like when I'm doing some of my mountain runs, I might only run 10K, but it could take 2 hours in super technical terrain. So is that a 6 mile run or is that a 2 hour run? And so how do you look at that mentally? So if I was trying to run 200, like say 120 miles in that type of terrain, it would take me 40 hours. I'd be crushed by the end of it. So I do think that I tend to look at hours rather than mileage. I think it's interesting to track mileage to a certain degree, but it's not the most relevant fact as you're moving into more technical terrain. But yeah, I do think that there is. And I mean, I was kind of fortunate that when I was training, I didn't have access to, like, Strava wasn't a thing, so you couldn't really see quite what other people are doing to the same degree. I think that there's a lot you can learn from other people's training, and I love studying what other athletes are doing. But if you look at like what almost every one of the top athletes in the world does in the trail and mountain running space, they're all doing a lot of other activities. Killian Jornet, Jim Walmsley, Katie Scheid, they're incredible multi-sport athletes. So yeah, I mean, even Courtney DeWalter grew up as a cross-country skier. Scott Jurek was a cross-country skier. They do a lot of variety in their training already.
So if I'm listening to this, and I would say, hey, I hope one of these guys asks this question. During your build phase, how much running do you do? How much cross training do you do? And I know you just spoke about number of hours, and I think that's a great context to put it in. But of those many hours, how many did you dedicate to running and other selected activity? Start with Adam on this, and then Emma, if I'd like to hear what you have to say too.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the way that I like to become more and more specific as I'm getting closer to the event. So, I would say, through the winter, like I might not run much at all, like 1 or 2 days a week. And then I'm mostly skiing. For me, it's either, doing skimo or cross-country skiing. I love climbing. So I'll go to the climbing gym a couple of days a week. And for me, it's fairly social. And then as I get closer to my event, that will start tipping over into, say, like 80% of my training is running. And then the final 20% is some form of cross training if my body feels that it can handle it. But ultimately, I'd say that kind of at its peak, that's more or less where the breakdown is about 80-20. Yeah.
Nice. How about you, Emma? Are you an 80-20? Are you more or less?
I think probably closer to the opposite.
Really?
In the winter, I'm probably that 80% skiing and 20% running and other activities. And then summer, I would probably say 50-50, really, like 50 running and 50 everything else. That'll fluctuate here and there. But as I've alluded to with injuries in the past, I've found that if I just do more of the other things and not get too carried away with the running, then I'm able to persist throughout the season. So maybe as the summer goes on, once I put a bit more load on, I'll be able to get more to like a, 60-40 for the running side of things. But
Good. So here's my question for you. So winter's just passed in this question. You've done 80% other stuff and 20% running. How do you feel then leaning back into the run? Do you have to acclimate to it? Do you think, wow, I really got places to go? Or do you say to yourself, wow, I really retained a lot of fitness because of this work that I've been doing. I could probably race in 2 weeks if I wanted to. Do you feel that kind of
Mm.
fitness in preparation after the winter, 80%?
I'd say so, yeah, especially because the skiing is so much uphill and the sky
Mm.
running is so much uphill. So a lot of that feels very similar, and in some ways it just feels easier because it's lighter having running shoes instead of skis and ski boots and a bigger
Mm.
bag. Um, you do get less glide, so that part's harder. I really feel the downs when I run downhill. I'm sore for probably a week afterwards. So
Mm.
I try and ease into that. And then as far as like fast flat running, that takes a bit longer. And part of that's because I force myself to hold back, or else I'd tweak something, pop an Achilles or a hamstring or something. So I don't think it takes too long, which I'm often surprised by, and I try and remind other people who are going through injury is we gain it back way quicker than we think that we would. So it's not all lost. You don't just your fitness doesn't disappear over a few weeks or that one workout that you miss. Like you'll be okay.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
good.
Can I ask Emma a question? Emma,
Yeah,
do you do any sort
absolutely.
of do you do any running intensity or intervals in the winter, or do you just do easy running?
So kind of depends on the conditions really. Like if it's -40 and snowy, I'm not doing intensity. But
Mhm.
no, this year I tried to get probably one intensity workout a month in. And then as we started approaching spring, I tried to increase that to like, okay, once every 2 weeks and then once every week if I could manage it, if it worked out with
Mhm.
schedule. So yeah, try to get some in the winter because that is an important factor to keep. But if it doesn't make sense with conditions or how the body's feeling, then I won't. But then I'll just make sure that I do take more time on this end to build up to it.
No, that's interesting. I mean, because
You know, I
speaking of adaptation, I mean, it's something I've been thinking about. Because I'm 45 now, and I became a professional athlete at the age of 17. So, 28
Mm.
years of training, and I have had some quite serious injuries from trauma. It's like I broke my back and my hip in a bad mountaineering accident in 2016. And so when I was starting out in sport, and for quite a long time, I could handle two, maybe three intense runs a week. Now I can maybe handle one a week, maybe one every 2 weeks, really. And so what I try to do is I try to do that one running intensity, and then I will do another intensity on the bike, or something lower impact. And I find that way I'm able to maintain, once again, like a higher aerobic output and sort of keep touching those zones, but without the same kind of long-term damage to my body. Because I do one hard run now, and then I am really, really sore for, if I do the run properly, for 4 to 5 days. And so I need to be careful that way. Yeah.
And for everyone that's 45 or older, present company excluded, Scott, we don't have to be in that group. What steps do you take to recover as a 45 plus year old runner? What do you do that you found successful that we might want to learn?
Actually, one thing is stay on top of the intensity. Short for me, like I can grind. Like my body's like I'm very good at grinding. I can grind very easily. But one thing I do lose is speed, and so I'm finding that doing shorter but higher intensity workouts is really really beneficial. So like 6 by 3 minutes with like lots of rest in between, whereas before I
Mm.
might have done 10 or 12 times 3 minutes, with 1 minute rest. I just can't do that anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
really trying to focus when I'm doing quality, make sure that the quality is really, really good quality. And then really, rather than looking at a 1 week cycle, maybe look at like a 10-day cycle or a 2 week cycle. So can I get one workout in every, 10 days to 2 weeks instead of, twice a week, for instance. So that's one thing that's really
Mm-hmm.
worked for me. Going to the gym, like lifting weights, is increasingly important for me. I find I don't enjoy it that much, although I'm learning to. I'm really learning to. But I do find that I notice a really big difference when I do that. And then hiking uphill as well, for me works really well. I'm really fortunate, but I have a 1,000 meter climb with a gondola that I can take down, and so I can do these like uphill hikes It's about 2 miles and 1,000 meters. So it's really, really steep. So I can do that. And so rather than do like a tempo run, I can just hike up that. And my heart rate is in kind of, zone 3 type effort. And it's much lower impact on my body as well. So that's another way of managing it. I mean, I can just take the gondola down, which is, saves the body. You still need to train some downhill, but it's nice just to be able to have that. I'm fortunate to have that. But if you don't, there are step mills, or you can put your treadmill at an incline, which I think is really important.
Good.
This panel, we have a few decades. We have all the decades almost represented on this panel. As we're talking about this, I'm thinking about our friend Don Lee McKinley. Lee McKinley is older than both Don and myself, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, I remind him of that anytime I can. So yes, he is.
And he continually got faster and faster. And one of the things that he started doing as he was aging was, as Emma has figured out early in her 20s, right? 20s, right? You're in your 20 decade, right?
I'm 30
30s?
now. I'm 30.
You're still in your 20s. Is that the reducing the amount of running. I think he was training for some of these long distance ultras, doing 80% biking and doing interval training on his bike
and swimming. Yeah.
And he was just getting faster. You look at his races 15 years ago, and he was continually setting PRs in these long distance races. And I think that's really impressive. And Adam, I appreciate you saying that as we get older, maybe we can't do as much, but through different activities or skewing those activities, we can still get a training benefit. Yeah. So thank you for doing that.
This is a bit of an aside. Have you guys seen that guy who's trying to run a sub 230 marathon at the age 65? He's run a sub 230 marathon. He ran his first one, I think, when he was 18. He's done one every decade, and he's still trying to do it at the age of 64. He just ran 235, I think it is, or 236 at his last marathon. So it's an incredible story. So I love hearing those stories of longevity. But he also talked about having to change his mileage, as he's gotten older, and just trying to figure it out. It's all figuring it out. It's all a game, and that's the best part about it. And that's the adaptation. It's who am I this year? Like, what is my body this year? What am I capable of doing this year? And that's all. Like, that's why we enjoy doing it. That's the diversity. That's the adaptability. It's just because I could do something 1 year ago, 2 years ago, I have new injuries, new stresses, new goals, new desires. So where am I at now, and sort of accepting where you are now and making the most of that. I think that's kind of the joy of it all.
Well, I think the golden nugget I'm taking away from this episode is I can give myself permission to do other things besides run. Now, I love running. We all love it. That's the reason why we started doing it, is because we love to be out in nature and get out there and run and migrate through the mountains. But it's okay to, as Don and I have done recently, to just go out and hike real hard, and that's okay. I think there's a training effect there. Don, you had a comment, and then I want to ask Emma about this Instagram post that I saw the other day. I found it, and I want to ask her about it.
Well, that makes me want to hold off on my question, but I am going to say this. I agree with you, Adam, about the fun part, evaluating the body that you're in and taking a good, honest look and deciding how you're going to apply yourself. Where are your new strengths? What new weakness might have popped up, and you need to change your strategy of getting to that start line or that trailhead and saying, what do I have today? What do I need to do? And then being absolutely okay with that change. If you can make it from start to end and manage it efficiently, if you're applying yourself, you run the smartest race you can, keeping your pace right, your heart rate right, your breathing right, your fluids right. There's a lot of things to juggle. And that's the fun part, I think, about this race. It doesn't matter if you're hitting the podium or you run your very best. Can you run your very best that day based on experience, your wisdom, and applying yourself I think that is the fun part. You don't have to be running the fastest out on the course. You have to be running the smartest on the course.
Good point. Good point.
Well,
All right.
when guys slow down, we start thinking this way, Scott. So, you asked me some time back when I was faster, I didn't have that same mindset.
We can justify anything, right?
That's right. That's right.
All right, Emma. I love this Instagram post. You did it a few days ago, and I'm gonna read verbatim, and then we're gonna dive into why you said that. Okay, it said that you're 2 weeks away from your first running race of the season. I can tell you that there's no way I feel in championship shape. What I can tell you is that I'm in shape to try hard. Ooh, I love that. And then you put a little caveat. It says, well, actually being real, I'm never sure I was ever actually felt like I was in championship shape. So you kind of put a little caveat there, but unpack that a little bit. What did you mean by that?
Sure. Well, we kind of touched on it a bit earlier when you asked if I ever think that I should be running more, or I need to hit 100-mile week, and if I then, question what I'm doing. And I for sure do. I think you always look back to your training before you do a competition or an effort, and that can help you gain some confidence in what you've done and can kind of project what type of result you might get. And so at this stage in the season, when I don't feel like I've done much running, I haven't spent much time running up and down, that sort of thing, haven't spent time in heat, all that, it's hard for me to feel like I'm ready. And I know that. I accept that I'm not as ready as I would ever be before any race. But I also know that I'm coming in really excited. I'm coming in, knock on wood, not injured yet. My energy levels are good. I'm really just pumped to go and race somewhere new that I've not raced before with a different group of people and just get the season going. And so I think with that attitude, I'm putting less pressure on myself. I'm not entering knowing you better win or you better go like as absolutely fast as you can. Instead, I have this kind of like more calm approach to it of let's go, let's see what happens. I know that I have fitness, like I'm not just starting from the couch. And this can be a bit of a training race so that later in the season I am feeling more and more ready. And then I just wanted to share that message, I guess, because I think so many of us do put these big limits on ourselves, and we take ourselves out of contention before even starting anything, whether that's race or relationships or work. Like, if you don't believe that you have a chance, then you probably won't do it. And so I think it's important just to remind myself that in the past, in these races that I have done well in, I've probably felt this exact same thing. I've probably got to the start line thinking, whoa, I'm way over my head. I'm not ready for this. This is so long, and all these other people around me look so fit. Like, they're going to be way faster. Do I even deserve to be here? And then, boom, you have fun, you enjoy it, and sometimes you do well. So it's nice to remind myself as much as anyone that it's okay to not feel 100% ready, because you probably never will. And instead just being excited for the experience and curious about what it'll be, makes it harder to fail, I guess.
Well, and this question goes to you, Adam. We talked about all the physical benefits that come from variety in your training, but this post that Emma did, I think, emphasizes the mental benefit that we get with variety. I mean, she's excited to get out there and try hard. Tell us about how that helped you in your training, or still does in your training. How does variety help you mentally stay focused and fresh on the trail?
I mean, so an area that I really enjoy at the moment, I really enjoy rock climbing. I am far from an elite rock climber, but the reason why I love rock climbing is because, take running. I've been running for a very long time. And so I have certain benchmarks in mind as to what I believe I should be able to do, or how fast I should be able to run, or how it should feel running at certain paces. Doing a new sport, I no longer have those preconceived notions. I'm a beginner again. And I think being a beginner, there's like joy in it. I'm like progressing, I'm improving. And I think that there's a lot of, just power in that. And then try to remember the feeling of being a beginner and what it was like when I started out and running, before I had these preconceived notions, and then trying to take that feeling that I have from climbing and then bringing that into my running. And there's just like I don't know, it's not laissez-faire, but it's more like, it's actually the opposite of laissez-faire. It's as kind of, as Emma was saying, it's what can I do? I'm just kind of curious, like, what am I capable of doing today? And I think that that's ultimately how we should approach it. And, any race that I've done, I think the other word Emma used was curiosity. Just being curious about what you're capable of. And I think that ultimately, I like to view myself as like an adventurer, and like curiosity is at the heart of adventure. It was like at one point I was adventuring into what was my physical limits were, and I still like to do that. So it's a curiosity about what my physical limits are. And some days I like to be curious about the places I'm going, and so I'll just go and run to explore an area, and that satisfies that curiosity. It's the same in picking races. I pick races that I'm curious about, that excite me, but I have like an emotional attachment to, as opposed to just doing events that I feel I should do. If I feel I should do them, I probably won't enjoy it as much. Whereas if it's like emotionally excited by it, then I think you'll have a much better performance.
Well, I have a final question, Scott, if it's okay. So to both of you, you've gone to a race, you have a finish time. It's still fresh in your mind. In fact, you even remember what you wore last year for that race. How do you go into that race not racing yourself or expecting the same exact results, because you're not the same person? Maybe you're carrying something else along. Maybe you're just not the same person. How do you race yourself or put that other racer, last year's race, behind you and still perform happily and happily? Wait, did I say happily once? There was another word. So it's not happily twice, but healthfully. It was an H word. So healthfully and happily.
Start there. I think one of the words that's come up a lot already in this discussion is variety. And that's something that is a guarantee in the mountains. So that's how these races are unique from an indoor track race. Like an indoor track race, other than the location of it, so slightly you might have difference in altitude, but otherwise everything's controlled. There's no headwind. You're not dealing with a different temperature. It's all very standard. Whereas in these races, who knows what can happen? And that is, I think, what helps take some of that load off yourself too, of like, nothing will ever be the exact same. Even if your fitness was the same, you might have a very different time result based on all these other factors. And so I think that is what keeps it so exciting, is it's hard to compare the same race. It's hard to compare other races just because of how many factors influence the conditions that will be there that day.
I think that's healthy. I think that's good, and makes me happy to hear that. So I got to use my 2 H words in there. Adam, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, how boring would it be if you knew the outcome before you started? I mean, that's why we race. It's just to see. It's like, can you handle what's thrown in front of you? I mean, otherwise you wouldn't bother. And sometimes the answer isn't exactly what you want it to be, and then you have to learn how to deal with that. And there's real beauty in that. I think it's those races where you've had to overcome some adversity or struggle or unforeseen circumstance, and you are able to face that challenge and still make a positive outcome from it. Those are the ones that really stick with you. Like I've won races and being like, oh, that wasn't really that awesome. Like it wasn't that interesting. And I've had other races where like kind of everything's gone wrong, and I've still managed to eke out a performance I'm proud of, facing all those adversities. And those are the ones that I remember, 20 years later.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Well, thank you, Emma. Thank you, Adam, for joining us. I think that here's the challenge I'm going to put out to you, Don, and to myself, and to anybody listening. Make a list of some various activities that you've never tried before that could help you balance your training effect, and try something new this summer. So if you haven't rock climbed before, maybe that's the thing that you're going to try this year. Or if you haven't paddle boarded, maybe that's the thing. If you haven't got on a canoe, try that and see what effect comes from the variety that you've started or this new training vehicle. That's the challenge that I have for you and for everyone out there. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Emma, for teaching us that it's okay to have variety, and especially to not put too much emphasis or too much pressure on how many miles per week. I love that too, that it just is, make sure you're getting out and putting in the hours, not necessarily the miles or kilometers, depending on where you live. So thank you very much. Most important thing is get outside and run or bike or swim or paddle.
Mas.